are, quote, just getting our hands around the discovery. The judge knows he's dealing with courtroom clowns. The judge knows that every federal prosecutor in the Eastern District of Virginia has refused to participate in this case. The judge knows all of the public information in this case. The judge knows that he's watching a legal Trump clown show in his courtroom. And although he dealt with it politely today.
Okay, so Donald Trump just got dragged out of a courtroom? Yeah, you heard that right. Dragged out, like physically removed by security while he was screaming at a judge. And this wasn't some quiet, controlled exit. This was full chaos. Cameras rolling, reporters watching, Secret Service scrambling. The whole thing went completely off the rails. And honestly, can you believe this? Witnesses say he stood up in the middle of the proceedings, started yelling, and told the judge he was above the law, in a courtroom, with everyone watching. The kicker here is that Trump wasn't holding back at all, and people who were actually there are calling it unhinged, saying he lost complete control of himself. Now look, we've seen Trump have his moments in court before, right? We've seen him walk out. We've seen him complain to reporters in the hallway about unfair treatment and rigged systems. But this was different. This wasn't a calculated move. This wasn't some strategic play for the cameras or some rehearsed moment designed to energize his base. This was a complete meltdown, and the judge had security remove him, not escort him politely to the door, but actually remove him from the courtroom while proceedings were still happening. So what actually happened in that room? Why did Trump explode like this? And more importantly, what does this mean for everything that's coming next? Because this isn't just about one bad day in court. Come on, this is about a pattern. This is about mounting legal pressure. This is about a sitting president who's currently serving his second term, dealing with more legal battles than any president in American history, and it's all catching up to him in the most public. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us, be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
He also made it clear he has zero patience for Trumpian nonsense.
I see way possible. The scene was absolutely wild, according to multiple eyewitnesses who were present. Trump was sitting there, then something set him off. Maybe it was a ruling, maybe it was something the judge said, but whatever it was, he snapped. He stood up, started shouting, calling the judge a radical lunatic, saying the whole thing was rigged against him, that he was innocent, that this was nothing more than political persecution designed to take him down. And then security moved in quickly to control the situation. Now the official reports try to clean it up a bit. Naturally, they say Trump exited following an unsolicited outburst. They say he made statements about being an innocent man facing persecution from his political enemies. But the people who were actually in that room, they're telling a very different story from the sanitized version. They're saying it was complete chaos. They're saying Trump was completely out of control and spiraling. And they're saying the judge had absolutely no choice but to have him physically removed from her courtroom. And here's what makes this even crazier, if you can believe it. This isn't the first time Trump has done something like this. Trump has a history with courtroom drama that goes back decades. He's clashed with judges before. He's walked out before, in dramatic fashion. He's been threatened with contempt before, by frustrated judges trying to maintain order. But each time it gets a little worse. Each time he pushes a little further past the boundaries of acceptable courtroom behavior. And now we're at the point where security is physically removing him from the courtroom because he can't control his temper. Like, think about that for a second. A sitting president of the United States being dragged out of court because he couldn't control himself during a legal proceeding. That's where we are right now as a country. So why does this matter? Why should anyone care about Trump having another bad day in court when he's had so many already? Because this isn't just about Trump anymore. Are you kidding me? This is about the rule of law. This is about whether anyone, even a president, has to follow the same rules as everyone else in this country. And right now, it's looking like Trump doesn't think he does. He literally said it out loud. He said he was above the law, in front of witnesses, in front of the judge who was presiding over his case, in front of Secret Service agents who are sworn to protect him, but also watched him have this meltdown. And the timing? The timing makes this even more explosive than it already is. Trump's already dealing with multiple court cases simultaneously, multiple investigations from different jurisdictions, multiple legal threats that could land him in serious trouble, including potential prison time. And instead of playing it cool, Instead of keeping his composure, like his lawyers probably begged him to do, he's melting down in public. He's giving prosecutors more ammunition to use against him. He's making himself look unstable and unfit, and he's doing it all on camera for the world to see and analyze. The video clips that leaked out are everywhere now. Social media is going absolutely crazy with commentary and analysis. People are analyzing every word he said, every gesture he made, every moment of the meltdown frame by frame, and what they're seeing is not good for Trump at all. Even some of his supporters are starting to ask questions. Even people who've defended him through absolutely everything are wondering, is he okay? Can he actually handle this kind of pressure? And more importantly, should someone who acts like this be running the country and making critical decisions that affect millions of people? Because here's the thing we need to talk about. This isn't just about legal drama anymore. This is about temperament. This is about judgment under pressure. This is about whether Trump can keep it together when things get tough and the stakes are high. And based on what happened in that courtroom with all those witnesses present, the answer seems pretty clear. He can't handle it. All right, so let's dig into what actually went down in that courtroom, because the surface story is wild enough on its own. But when you start looking at the details, when you start connecting the dots between this incident and everything else happening in Trump's legal world, it gets even crazier than you might think. First, we need to understand where this happened and why the stakes were already so high. This wasn't just any random court appearance or minor hearing. This was during Trump's civil fraud trial. You know, the case about his business dealings, the case about allegedly inflating property values to get better loans and financial deals, the case that could cost him hundreds of millions of dollars if he loses. So the stakes, they're already sky high before he even walks into that courtroom. Trump's already stressed about this case. He's already been complaining about this judge for months on social media and to anyone who will listen. And now he's sitting there in that courtroom, listening to testimony that's damaging to his case, watching evidence pile up against him piece by piece, and something just breaks inside him. The judge in this case is not playing games with Trump at all. She's been firm with him from the very start of these proceedings. She's told him to sit down and be quiet. She's told him to stop making faces and disrupting the court. She's even threatened him with contempt citations before when he pushed boundaries. But Trump, he keeps pushing anyway. He keeps testing those boundaries like a child testing a parent. And on this particular day, he pushed way too far for any judge to tolerate. So here's how it played out according to the eyewitness accounts we have from people who were actually in that room. Trump was getting more and more agitated as the proceedings went on throughout the morning. He was whispering angrily to his lawyers, making faces at witnesses, shaking his head dramatically. All the stuff we've seen him do before in other court appearances. But then something tipped him over the edge. Maybe it was a ruling against him. Maybe it was testimony he really didn't like hearing. But whatever it was, he completely lost it in front of everyone. He stands up suddenly from his chair. His lawyers immediately try to stop him and pull him back down. But he's already going, and there's no stopping him at this point. He starts yelling at the judge directly, calling her biased against him, calling her a radical who's out to get him, saying the whole system is rigged against him from top to bottom. And then, this is where it gets really wild and unprecedented. He says he's above the law. He actually says those exact words out loud in a courtroom while the judge is sitting right there on the bench, staring at him in disbelief. Now the judge has had enough at this point, and honestly, who can blame her? She's dealt with Trump's disruptions before. She's given him warnings. She's tried to be patient and fair despite his constant attacks on her. But this crosses every line imaginable. She signals to security officers in the courtroom, and they move in fast to remove him before things escalate even further. And here's where the accounts start to vary a bit, depending on who you ask. Some witnesses say Trump went willingly once security approached him and touched his arm, but others who were there, they're saying security had to physically guide him out of the room, that he was still yelling as they walked him toward the door, that it took multiple officers to get him out of the room and into the hallway. And the whole time this is happening, reporters are watching and taking notes, cameras are recording from the back of the room, the Secret Service is trying to manage the situation without making it worse or creating a physical altercation. Can you imagine being in that room as this unfolds? Like, think about it for a second. You're a reporter covering what you thought would be a routine court hearing. You're there to cover a legal proceeding and take notes. And suddenly the sitting president of the United States is having a full meltdown right in front of you. You're watching security physically remove him from the courtroom. You're hearing him scream about persecution and rigged courts and how he's being treated so unfairly. It's completely surreal and unlike anything anyone has ever witnessed in American history. But here's what most people are missing about this story when they see the headlines. This isn't just about Trump losing his temper or having a bad day. This is strategic failure on a massive scale. Trump's whole legal strategy up to this point has been to delay cases as long as possible, to complain loudly about unfair treatment, to paint himself as a victim of political persecution. And you know what? It's been working pretty well with his base supporters. His supporters eat this victim narrative up. They believe the courts are out to get him because he's an outsider. But this courtroom meltdown, this changes things dramatically, because now even neutral observers who aren't particularly political are watching this and thinking, wait a minute, maybe the problem isn't the courts at all. Maybe the problem is actually Trump himself. When you're literally screaming that you're above the law in front of a judge, that's not victimhood anymore. That's entitlement. As someone who genuinely believes the rules don't apply to them because of who they are, and the legal experts who analyze these cases for a living, they're having an absolute field day with this incident. They're pointing out that Trump just made his lawyers' jobs 10 times harder than they already were. How do you defend a client who stands up in court and basically admits he thinks he's above the law? How do you argue that the proceedings are fair and your client is being treated properly when your client is literally being removed by security for disrupting the court? You can't make those arguments anymore. Trump just torpedoed his own defense strategy in spectacular fashion. Plus, there's the whole contempt issue hanging over this now. The judge could have held Trump in contempt right there on the spot. She could have fined him heavily. She could have taken even harsher measures that would have made headlines everywhere. And honestly, she probably should have done exactly that. Because if anyone else had done what Trump did, if any regular defendant had stood up and screamed at a judge like that, they'd be facing serious consequences immediately. But because he's the president, because the situation is already so politically charged and controversial, the judge has to think about the bigger picture and the fallout. And that's the real problem here, right? Trump knows this dynamic. He knows that judges are absolutely terrified of being seen as political actors. He knows that going too hard on him will create a massive media firestorm. So he exploits it ruthlessly. He pushes boundaries that no one else could push. He does things that would land anyone else in jail, and he gets away with it because of who he is. Until now, until he pushes so far that even the most cautious judge has to respond somehow. Let's talk about Trump's history with judges for a moment, because this pattern isn't new at all. Trump has been clashing with judges his entire career, in business and politics. During his first term as president, he publicly attacked judges who ruled against him on policy matters. He questioned their legitimacy and impartiality. He tried to undermine their authority in the eyes of his supporters. And in these current legal cases, it's gotten even worse than before. He's been sanctioned multiple times. He's been fined for violating gag orders. He's been warned repeatedly about his behavior by multiple judges. There was that time he just walked out during his fraud trial testimony, just got up in the middle of questioning and left the courtroom. His lawyers were shocked and scrambling. The judge was absolutely furious, but Trump didn't care at all. He went out to the hallway and immediately complained to reporters about how unfair everything was. That's his pattern. He disrupts the process, then plays the victim to the cameras. But this latest incident, this takes it to a whole new level that we've never seen before. Because walking out is one thing, it's disrespectful and childish, but it's one thing. Getting physically removed while screaming is something else entirely. It shows a complete breakdown of composure and self-control. It shows someone who's cracking under the immense pressure, and that's genuinely dangerous. Not just for Trump's legal cases, but for the entire country that he's supposed to be leading. Think about what's happening behind the scenes right now. Trump's lawyers are probably pulling their hair out in frustration. They're trying to mount a coherent defense strategy. They're trying to manage an impossible client who won't listen to advice. And now they have to deal with this public meltdown. They have to go back into that courtroom and explain to the judge why their client had a complete breakdown. They have to somehow convince the court that Trump can control himself going forward and won't disrupt proceedings again. Good luck with that impossible task. And Trump's political team, they're in full damage control mode right now. They're trying desperately to spin this as more persecution. They're putting out statements about how the courts are weaponized against Trump. But it's getting harder and harder to sell that narrative when video footage shows Trump literally losing control in a courtroom filled with witnesses. The other thing people aren't talking about enough is the Secret Service angle to all this. Trump still has full Secret Service protection as a sitting president. Those agents were in that courtroom during the meltdown. They had to watch their protectee, the person they're sworn to protect, get removed by court security. They had to coordinate that whole situation without creating an even bigger scene or physical confrontation. Can you imagine the confusion in that moment? The awkwardness? The sheer absurdity of having to protect someone while they're simultaneously being escorted out for contempt of court. And here's where it gets really interesting for Trump's future. This courtroom meltdown is going to follow him everywhere now. Every single future court appearance, the judges will remember this incident. The prosecutors will reference it in their arguments. The media will replay the footage over and over. Trump just created a highlight reel for everyone who wants to argue he's unfit for office or unstable under pressure. Okay, so let's break down what this actually means in practical terms, because we can talk all day about the drama and the spectacle, but what are the real consequences here? What happens next in Trump's legal cases? And why should anyone care beyond just the entertainment value of watching a president lose his mind? First, the legal implications are massive and far-reaching. Trump just made every single one of his court cases significantly harder to win. Judges talk to each other, especially in high-profile cases like this. Prosecutors share information and strategies. And now everyone in the legal system knows for a fact that Trump is capable of completely losing control in court. That knowledge affects how they approach his cases going forward. That affects the decisions they make about him. For example, judges might be far less lenient with him now. In future proceedings, they might come down harder on any disruptions or outbursts. They might be much quicker to issue contempt citations or impose sanctions, because if they let Trump get away with this kind of behavior without consequences, it sets a terrible precedent for the entire justice system. It tells every defendant in America that you can act however you want in court as long as you're famous enough or powerful enough, and no judge wants to be responsible for setting that kind of precedent. Plus, and this is huge for his criminal cases, this gives prosecutors incredible ammunition to use against him. They can argue that Trump shows absolutely no respect for the legal system or rule of law. They can point to this specific incident as clear evidence of his character and mindset. They can use it in sentencing recommendations if he's convicted. If Trump gets convicted of anything, and that's looking more likely with each passing day, this courtroom meltdown will absolutely factor into his punishment and how harsh the sentence might be. Second, the political fallout from this is going to be significant. Trump's already serving his second term as president. He can't run for president again because of term limits. So this isn't about future elections for him personally anymore, but it's absolutely about his influence over the Republican Party and conservative movement. It's about whether Republican voters still support him after seeing this. It's about whether other Republican politicians want to be associated with him publicly. And it's about whether his legal problems start seriously affecting the broader party's electoral chances. And here's the thing that Republican leadership is worried about. They've been trying desperately to distance themselves from Trump's legal drama. They want to focus on policy issues that help them win elections. They want to talk about the economy, immigration, crime, whatever resonates with voters. But Trump keeps pulling them back into this legal chaos. Every courtroom meltdown, every legal setback, it dominates the news cycle completely. And it makes the whole Republican Party look bad, by association, in the eyes of swing voters. Some Republicans are getting genuinely fed up with this situation, though they won't say so publicly. Privately, behind closed doors, they're saying Trump needs to calm down and shut up. They're worried that his legal problems are actively hurting their chances in future elections. They're concerned that swing voters and independents see this constant chaos and decide to vote Democrat just to avoid the drama and instability. And honestly, they might be absolutely right about that concern. The polling on this whole situation is really interesting when you dig into the numbers. Trump's base, his hardcore supporters who would follow him anywhere, they're not moving at all. They still love him unconditionally. They still think he's being persecuted by evil forces. This courtroom stuff just fires them up even more and strengthens their support. But independents, moderate voters who swing elections, they're getting tired of all this. They're starting to see Trump as more trouble than he's worth. And in close elections that come down to a few thousand votes in key states, those swing voters absolutely matter and can decide everything. Third, what this courtroom incident says about Trump's mental state is concerning. Look, I'm not a psychologist or mental health expert, but you don't need a medical degree to see that something's seriously off here. Trump's behavior has been getting noticeably more erratic over the past year, more desperate in tone and content, more out of control in public settings. In this courtroom incident, it's a symptom of a much bigger problem that's developing. Trump's under absolutely incredible pressure right now from multiple directions. He's facing multiple criminal prosecutions that could send him to prison. He could actually go to jail if convicted. His business empire is at serious risk of collapse. His reputation is getting shredded daily in the media. And he's not a young man anymore. He's in his late 70s, dealing with stress that would break people half his age. The cumulative stress has to be taking a massive toll on him physically and mentally. And when you combine that extreme stress with Trump's personality, his pathological need to always be in control, his complete inability to admit weakness or mistakes, his narcissistic tendencies, you get these explosive outbursts. You get courtroom meltdowns like we just witnessed. You get unhinged social media posts at 3 a.m, ranting about enemies. You get increasingly desperate behavior that makes him look unstable. His advisors and handlers have to be genuinely worried at this point. They're watching him fall apart in real time, right in front of their eyes. They're trying desperately to manage the situation and minimize damage, but Trump doesn't listen to anyone's advice. He never has throughout his entire life. He thinks he knows better than everyone else around him, and that's exactly why we're in this situation right now. Fourth, the bigger picture about rule of law is what really matters here. Beyond Trump personally, this is where it gets really important for American democracy, because Trump standing up in court and saying out loud that he's above the law, that's not just empty words or rhetoric. That's a genuine philosophy. That's how he actually sees the world and his place in it. And that worldview is genuinely terrifying for anyone who cares about democracy. We've spent 250 years as a country building a system where no one is supposed to be above the law, where presidents can be held accountable for their actions, where even the most powerful people in society have to follow the same rules as everyone else. And Trump is actively testing whether that system still works in practice. He's pushing every boundary he can find. He's defying every norm that used to constrain presidential behavior, and he's seeing what he can get away with before someone stops him. So far, he's gotten away with a lot more than anyone expected. He's avoided consequences that would have completely destroyed anyone else's career. He's skated by on technicalities and delays and political pressure, but the walls are slowly closing in on him. The courts are running out of patience with his antics, and this latest meltdown might actually be the moment where everything changes and real accountability happens. The legal system is notoriously slow and careful by design. It bends over backwards to be fair to defendants, but it does have limits that can't be crossed. And Trump might have just found those limits in the most public way possible, because no judge, no matter how cautious or politically aware, can let someone scream that they're above the law and just ignore it. There have to be consequences eventually. There has to be accountability or the whole system breaks down. So what happens now in the immediate future? There are a few realistic possibilities here. One, the judge could formally hold Trump in contempt of court. She could fine him heavily. She could even impose more serious penalties, like brief jail time. That's the nuclear option that would create massive headlines, but it's definitely on the table now. Two, Trump's lawyers could desperately try to negotiate some kind of apology or statement, try to smooth things over with the judge, try to convince her it won't happen again, and Trump has learned his lesson. Good luck with that strategy, though. Three, the case just moves forward with everyone pretending this incident didn't happen, but with the judge being way less patient, going forward and ready to crack down hard on any future disruptions. My guess is probably going to be option 3, combined with elements of option 1. The judge will issue some kind of formal sanction or penalty, maybe a substantial fine, maybe a very stern warning on the record, but probably not full contempt, because that creates endless appeals and delays and even more chaos that nobody wants. But she'll also make it crystal clear that the next outburst will have immediate and serious consequences that Trump won't be able to avoid. And Trump, he'll probably do it again anyway, because that's exactly who he is. He can't help himself at this point. He sees any pushback as a personal attack, any criticism as persecution by enemies, and he lashes out reflexively. It's a pattern that's repeated throughout his entire life, and it's not changing now when he's under more pressure than ever before. That's what this courtroom meltdown really means. It's not just about one bad day. It's about whether our system of justice still works. This wild,